Okay, so before we get started, I'd recommend that you go to the video description of this video and grab the URL to this project. I generally design these to be sort of a walkthrough, so we walk through these together. So go ahead and grab that. And this is video 3 of the Simple Container series. And we're going to deploy a simple container in GCP, and it complements the Managed Instance Groups video. And in that video, we created a VM image. We deployed these Flask-based services that interact with Firestore, and then we created a managed instance group around it. And the way it would work is it would start out with 2, but it could burst up to 4. And as the CPU load on the services goes up, it will add additional units at 60%. If it goes below 60%, it adds a unit. And then if it goes below 60% for 5 minutes, it removes a unit. So it scales up and down from that VMs based on that setting. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that same exact code, that same Flask code, and we're going to build a container out of it, push that container into Google Artifact Registry, and then use GCP Run. And so what we'll be using is we'll use Firestore for the persistent data storage. That's the same thing we used in the other video. We're going to containerize those microservices using Docker, push that container images after the build into the Google Artifact Registry, and then end up deploying the Google Cloud Run instance to run that container that we deployed. And so let's talk about sort of the infrastructure that we need. And the first one is the Google Artifact Registry. Now, I keep telling folks that these registries things are pretty much the same. I guess there's a caveat here. The Google Artifact Registry is pretty much the same when you're using it for Docker images, because there's something that Docker designed or specified an API contract for how repositories are supposed to work or registries are supposed to work, and it fully implements that, so it works very much the same. But Google's sort of the secret sauce, or what they did is they made this thing where it's an artifact registry for any kind of artifact whatsoever, any kind of build artifact. And so in addition to Docker, you can put in jar files that have Spring Boot. You can put wars that are web applications. You can put in Node.js applications built with NPM. There's a Go component of it, and I think it also does a Python packaging app. So you can probably take this code directly, and we did another video with the GCP Run and using serverless web functions or cloud functions, and you can do the same thing. And so it does have a little bit of secret sauce, but for our purposes, we're just going to use the Docker features of it, so it's going to feel like the same. And again, this is, once you put the stuff into the Google Artifact Registry, you can use the different GCP ecosystem, like Kubernetes and Cloud Run, and there's App Engine. And so once we have built our repository, or built our container, built our repository, we're going to push that container into the repository, and then we're going to use Cloud Run. Cloud Run is the simplest way to run a container inside of GCP, and you just point it to a Docker image in our example, and the Artifact Registry, and it does automatic scaling where it bursts up and down based on your API load. So it's a little bit different. It's not CPU load, but it's API load, but that's kind of what you want for microservices. And also it does HTTPS. And so the thing about this one is, just like every other example, the GCP one is dirt simple. It's a lot less lines of Terraform code. It builds the quickest. I guess, again, the Google ethos seems to be keep the simple stuff simple. And so we'll work through this, and you'll notice that it's going to build really quick. So let's look at the diagram, which is very similar. We have a project, or you have a project that you need to define. Then we're going to build the Artifact Registry. Again, we're going to build the Docker container, take that and push that into Artifact Registry, and then we're going to do a Cloud Run instance, which is interacting with the candidates table, interacting with the Flask registry to pull that in there. The permissions are all stored on the project level, so that's a little bit different than the other ones. It's a little bit easier to manage these permissions. And so that's what we're going to end up building. So let's go to the prerequisites. The first thing you need is, of course, a Google Cloud account. Then you need the G Cloud CLI, then you need Terraform, then you need Postman for testing, and then Docker. You also have this thing in GCP where you have to enable APIs, and there's an API setup script which I will show you, which will register all the APIs, but you may want to manage that manually or yourself, but you do have to enable the right AMIs. Now there's also or APIs. There's also a video that we did which defines or does an easy setup of GCP and Terraform. If you've never done one of these before, you might want to do that because it spins up a network with a simple VM and it does the basics. So I'm assuming you have all that done now. So now we're going to go through the build. So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is to copy this code. And I have an Ubuntu development environment. So I am going to clear and I'm going to paste in that. Alright, so I've downloaded the code. So the first script we want to do is check env. And let's go, hey, you don't have credentials.json. So you've got to upload your JSON file for your credentials into the project. And see, I've got it. I'm in the Flask container. I'm going to upload. And it's from my laptop, credentials. And there we go. Now I should do check env. And you will see that it's now all validated. So the next thing we want to do is API setup. And that's going to go and enable the APIs you needed for the build. So once you do this, you probably want to take a couple of minutes and let it run or let it enable if you've never done it before. If you've done it the first time, then it's almost instantly. So with this finished. All right. So now I think we're ready to actually do the build. So I'm going to run apply.sh. And while it's doing the build, I'm going to go through and talk about the build. The build has 3 distinct phases. It's very similar to the other environments with the 3 distinct phases. You've got got to create the repository. We're going to do the Google Artifact Registry. Then once we've got that's a very simple block of Terraform code. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use Docker to build the image, the Flask image. And once that's done, we're going to push that into the repository. Okay, so those are after pushing the repository, we're going to deploy that with Google Cloud Run. And again, it's very simple. It runs pretty quickly. But at the end of this, we're going to run the validation that's complete, and we will test the script. So let's see with the build and see if I'm true that it's quick. Okay, it is still running, so we will pause and let this finish. Okay, so the build has succeeded. What you will notice is it does take a little bit of time for the API to become available. The build and deployment is asynchronous, which is the same with Azure. AWS, the build seemed to be synchronous, but that could be an artifact. It's not a big deal. It's just a matter of, at the end of the day, if you're writing a script to test it all at once, you have to be cognizant of these delays. So what we're going to do is do a simple smoke test. So I'm going to copy this guy right here. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to bring up a web browser tab, and you can see it's running. So it's connected. So let's go in the GCP console and take a look as to what got built. So I'm going to go in here, and the first thing we want to do is search for Artifact Registry. And you can see they named Universal Build, what was the description it said? Artifact. Universal Build Artifact Management. That goes to how GAR is a much bigger deal. And so we've got the repository. It's a format of Docker. It's Essential 1. We have scanning. If we click on the instance, you can see that's the container that we just built, and that's the checksum. So there's a checksum. So that's the container. So now let's go into the Cloud Run interface. So let's go to Cloud Run, fully managed app platform. And now you've got the container running. It's authenticated. Let's go into the service. And it's got a bunch of different tabs. The first one is the logs tab. So what I like about these simple runtimes is the logs are all easy to get to. If you've ever used Kubernetes, logs without something like Grafana or some other log aggregation tool, it's like dumpster diving. And so these services allow you to get to the logs very easily, so you can get in. Here's where it was started. So it's just a very easy interface to get into the logs. And then we've got revisions, and here we've got the container. It's has a minimum of 1 up to 3. It's running on port 8000. And then these are the memory, and I use very modest ones because you get charged by the resources you use. It's serverless, but you have to express how many CPU units you need, and it's in millis, which is a Kubernetes type of specification. Now, our networking, you can attach this to a network, but this is just a public access point, and that makes it real easy to deploy. And then finally, there's this YAML thing, which really kind of makes me suspect definitively that this is all Kubernetes behind the scenes. This is just a big wrapper onto Kubernetes, and they generate these, the YAML files for you. So this again is great because I view these services as like a stepping stone to Kubernetes. So the fact that you can have a YAML that you can probably go in and modify pretty easily when you convert to Kubernetes is really cool here. So let's go back to the documentation, and I think all we're really going to do now is use Postman. So let me do that. All right, so what we're going to do is run that validate script again. Then we're going to get this guy right here, and I'm going to copy that into Postman. So let's do new. Let's put that in there. And now this is the first endpoint, which is just like it was in the browser. So then we're going to do git. Let's do a git on candidates. All right. Then let's do a git on candidate John %20 Smith. And you should see that. And then the third one, actually this is the fourth one, I'm going to do homie 1, and now when I do candidates and do git, you're going to see, there you go. So you can see all 4 endpoints are up and running. So at this point, what I recommend you do is to, be a good, if you're not going to do anything more with this, is to be a good steward of your cloud account. And let's go ahead and run destroy. And while that's running, we'll go into the GCP specific things in this exercise. The first one is the Google Artifact Registry. It's a universal artifact registry, so you can put anything into it. Wars, jars, npm files, Python builds, Go's. I'm not sure what they use, but you can just package that stuff up very easily. The next thing was, we didn't get into it, but the uniqueness of the registry URI, it handles it for you. It ends up using the Flask, the project ID in there, but it's similar to the way AWS works. Azure is the anomaly here, where you have to actually pick a unique name. The system doesn't generate a unique for you. So there's that. There's the asynchronous deployment, which is really just a matter if you're trying to script builds where the updated deployment, it takes a few minutes for it to update, which is not a big deal. You just have to know that. So if you hit it immediately, it's not quite there yet. And finally, you don't have to empty the registry before running the destroy pipeline. AWS, you have to do something, either have to use different Terraform, or you have to use the AWS CLI. But the other ones, when you say destroy the registry, the default semantic is, oh, you got stuff in it, and deletes it anyway. So that's it for the GCP, and this is the last one in the series here. Now, one thing is just a preview is I have another series I'm going to do, which is going to be on how to use GitHub Actions. And so just a little preview, if you go look at, let's go to GitHub here. This is the project. We'll walk through setting all this up. But if you go into Actions, those build scripts that are in there, the build, check-env, destroy, validate, are all defined as GitHub actions. And so if you go look at the build, you can see that it does that 3 phases that we talked about. And what we're going to do is, in the separate video, we're going to walk through how you clone this project, everything you need to do to set up a remote backend, and then configuring the GitHub Actions, which is mostly in the settings, to put the right attributes you need to make sure the build works. So that'll be coming soon.